Hello, fellow poetry people. Today I come to you with The River of Bees by W.S. Merwin. In a dream I returned to the river of bees, 5 orange trees by the bridge, and beside 2 mills my house, into whose courtyard a blind man followed the goats and stood singing of what was older. Soon it will be 15 years. He was old, he will have fallen into his eyes. I took my eyes a long way to the calendars, room after room, asking how shall I live. One of the ends was made of streets, one-man processions carried through it, empty bottles, their image of hope, it was offered to me by name. Once, in the same city that I was born, asking what shall I say. He will have fallen into his mouth, men think they are better than grass. I return to his voice, rising like a forkful of hay. He was old, he is not real, nothing is real, nor the noise of death's drawing water. We are the echo of the future. On the door it says what to do to survive, but we were not born to survive, only to live. That's The River of Bees by W.S. Merwin. W.S. Merwin, William Stanley, American poet, born in 1927 and still kicking it, 91 years old, as of the recording of this video in February of 2019. This is it's a dream poem. I did this before, and I hopped around, and I think I'm going to stick with my thing of just kind of going through the poem stanza by stanza, even though this is a very irregular poem. You'll see that isn't, I'm reading this out of the Vintage Book of Contemporary American Poetry. It was originally published in a collection called The Lice in 1967. Year before I was born, but yes, I'm getting it out of the vintage book of poetry here, and it's got a lot of it's got a regular kind of lines and breaks and stuff like that. Merwin doesn't seem to be someone who there's a little brief bio thing at the beginning here, and saying that he wrote a poem he wrote should not be a manipulable, more or less reoccurring pattern, but an unduplicatable resonance, something that would be like an echo, except that it is repeating no sound. And we'll come to echoes in this poem, because in this poem we start off with in a dream. It's a dream poem, and that in a dream I return to the river of bees. I'd like to just start off with it's a dream. So we get the kind of we're going to be bouncing around. There's going to be maybe dream logic and stuff like that, but also the idea of I returned, and what is an echo but a return? And there's indeed a lot of returns and echoes in this poem. And I return to the river of bees, 5 orange trees by the bridge, and beside 2 mills my house. Which there's the whole thing here of is it a river? Is it a literal river of bees, or is it like, the reflection of the leaves of those orange trees on the river, and you get that? So you get a river of kind of swaying, kind of buzzing motion of the bees there. And then into whose courtyard a blind man followed the goats and stood singing of what was older. And you get blind men in poems, and they're singing, and I have to kind of go to, wow, we're going all the way back to the mythical, because it seems to not be an actual fact, but the mythical idea of the blind blind Homer singing his poems, singing of what was older, of a golden era, of the golden times when men were men, because that's the whole thing of a Greek myth, of the idea of like, well, back further and back further, men were greater men, because that was the sexist society of men were greater, larger, longer lived, and stuff like that. So we get that sort of, there is sort of a little bit of a kind of a glory at the beginning of this poem. But we switch from that kind of an idea to soon it will be 15 years. He was old, he will have fallen into his eyes. And it's like, there's fallen into my eyes. You get the sense of a kind of a decay, of a crumbling, falling into your eyes. Also, maybe he will have fallen into his eyes. There's almost like a falling into your vision, there's sort of being seduced, perhaps, in a sense of being seduced by what you see. I took my eyes a long way to the calendars, room after room, asking how shall I live. the calendars, it's almost like this is like a passage of time. I tried to kind of find references because I have this sense that there's an idea of calendars as something other than, flipping through calendars, but it's actually being kind of a room. And I wasn't able to track anything down there that I found that I could kind of bring up here, but that's an idea. And one of the ends is made of streets. One-man processions carry through it empty bottles, their image of hope. It was offered to me by name. And one of the ends, I stumbled. There's a lot of in this poetry of trying to my mind, I guess, like as a dream, your mind as a poem, your mind is struggling to kind of connect all these pieces together, and going from, long way to the calendars, room after room, asking how I shall live. One of the ends is made of streets. I get like one of the ends is like one of the dead ends is made of streets with one-man processions carrying through it empty bottles. It's like the idea of like the ridiculous thought of a procession of one there's the sort of the sense of the individuality of one, of kind of the arrogance of a one-man procession carrying his empty bottle, and it's an empty bottle. It's not a full bottle. I almost thought of thing of like what's in a bottle is like it's alcohol. But I think there's also just a thing of a one-man procession carrying his empty bottle. It's like there's nothing in there, and it's an image of hope. It isn't actually hope. It's the image of hope, the image of individuality, of being some sort of a savior in some way of living life properly, and being kind of a false end, a dead end of being an image of hope, but not actually being a thing of hope, and being offered to me by name. So there's an individual thing there of an image of hope being offered to you by name. It's the image of individuality, of this being a way of living that is a false hope, a false end, that is being offered to you by name individually. So going from there, and then once in the same city that I was born, asking what shall I say, and that once, there's that kind of the repetition and the kind of the echo of I'm sort of reaching here of saying that this is a part of this kind of searching of repeatedly going down the wrong road, going down the wrong dead ends, once, again and again, and in the same city that I was born. Asking what shall I say, and there being a thing there of being a poet, of being a person. Of like, well, how shall I live, and what shall I say? There's these kind of burning questions of existence here. The what shall I say is definitely much more of a thing for a blabbermouth, I guess, or for a poet. But it's right speech, right thought, right action. That idea I'm getting from that. And saying he will have fallen into his mouth, and that there's that again we've had he will have fallen, he was old, he will have fallen into his eyes, and then from the what shall I say to he will have fallen into his mouth. It's like you're falling into empty rhetoric, you're falling into simply just speaking, of not having an action there. It's like you have to have both. You have to have action to back up your words. And we get into this thing of men think they are better than grass, which I think is kind of resonates to me as kind of a heart of this poem, of the idea of men think they are better than grass. There's a thing of existence, of a being where we value, as human beings, of course, we're going to value each other. If I see a man on fire and I see a field on fire, I'm going to put the man out first. But there's a sense of which is of course proper, and don't worry, everyone out there who's on fire, I will put you out before I put the grass out on fire. Or if you see a forest burning, or you see a building with a whole bunch of people in it burning, you're of course going to attend to that. But there is also a sense of, in the sense of nature, in the sense of existence, that blades of grass are as equal a valid thing of existence as a human being, or a squirrel, or a bear, or anything else. And that men think they are better than grass. There's sort of this arrogance of like, we are going to live forever. We are somehow, us little scurrying mammals somehow are going to do better than the dinosaurs did, who so far the dinosaurs are winning. And I think Merwin definitely seems to be of the opinion that human beings probably don't have as much of a chance of survival in this world as even something like the dinosaurs, who didn't have survival. They didn't. They died out when they maybe became birds. But the the things that we classify as dinosaurs, that thing ended and something else continued on, like the grass will continue on. And I return to his voice rising like a forkful of hay, which is kind of going back to that blind man singing with the goats, stood singing of what followed the goats and stood singing of what was older. It's like I come back to that old man and his voice rising like a forkful of hay. And what is hay but dried grass? And what is the poet doing but scooping up human existence, and preserving it, drying it perhaps, and getting it to its essence. That idea of storing it for kind of whatever amount of time. I mean, it's hay, so it's not gonna be here forever either. He's not saying that as a poet, my poem is gonna last forever. Even Shakespeare will turn to dust one day with all other human beings. But I return to his voice rising like a forkful of hay. It's like he's holding up a forkful of hay, and that being kind of the poetic distillation. And indeed, also, what is hay for? Hay is for feeding animals. So this, all of our paper, what will it be at the end? It will decay, and it will be no better than grass. It will be something that will be poof into non-existence as well. He was old. He is not real. Nothing is real, nor the noise of death drawing water, which I think is getting to that whole sense of the impermanence of existence. He was old. He is not real. Nothing is real, nor the noise of death drawing water. And indeed, we're going back to the river of bees at the beginning of the thing, where it was this quite vibrant kind of the shimmering orange, kind of like a literal river of bees. It's like, but it's also something that's, it's flowing by. It's never the same. It's always in some ways dying. And it's like the noise of death drawing water. So we're also getting that idea of the echo again, because in the next line, he says, we are the echo of the future. It's like, we're not the future. We're the echo. We're the echo of the future. We're something that is going to pass and will be something that the future is not going to encompass. There's an interesting thing here. We are the echo of the future. We're something that's going to just kind of, we'll have our little mark on the future. It's going to be that kind of soft voice, but all of us here, we're simply echoes of what's going to happen next. And that's not gonna be us. And it's gonna be as permanent and as definite and as solid as an echo in the end. And indeed, we go to the last little stanza here of I'm going to call it stanza. Last little 3-line clump. I'll put it in the link down below, and hopefully you've been reading along. On the door it says what to do to survive, but we were not born to survive, only to live. And I have to go for that. Like, this is kind of what has the structure's been in this thing. We go to my house. And so on the door of my house, it says what to do to survive, but we were not born to survive, only to live. Which in some ways is the door to existence in a way. Our brief existence on this planet is out through our mothers, and it's like that's got the thing of what to do to survive, I guess, in a way, of to pass on our genes, or what to do to cement our existence on this thing. But as he says, we are not born to survive. We are only to live, only exist in this moment, and to perhaps think about being, we're no better than grass, and that perhaps we should bring that kind of a realization and respect to how we treat the world around us, which we don't. And that's Merwin is known as quite the ecologically minded poet. So yeah, that's me kind of talking through the River of Bees. It's one that I've been kind of carrying around with me for a while here, trying to get my head around, and I haven't quite got my head around, but I had a lot of fun getting what I have, and I've got it stored up in my head here so that I can walk around and recite it, and people will think I'm rather odd, which you guys all know. So yes, that's The River of Bees by W.S. Merwin. More poetry later.